This is Dr. Josh Long with AME Podcast, my quest to talk to folks who are still making music beyond the classroom. That's right, the folks that who are continuing after they've been in high school or beyond. And I always say that because I've seen a lot of people not performing, and I like to see the lifelong learning in music engagement. It's just so fun to me. So we have various guests on here who talk about, music making and still how they're involved with music. We are sponsored by Art and Music Emporium, which is serving artistic excellence. We do such things as fix instruments. We teach lessons focusing on adult learning, of course, and as well as we do sell some things online, but we do some performing initiatives such as the annual Community Band by the Sea, which happens in Wildwood, New Jersey in July, as well as the Bethlehem Steel Company Legacy Band, where we recreate the Bethlehem Steel Company Band, and we've been doing that yearly as well. Both of those performances do happen, like I said, yearly. You can participate in them. If you are interested in them, do check out our website, and on there you will see that we rehearse the day before the actual concert. So we actually give you music about a month in advance, and then we rehearse, and then we do the concert the next day. We also do sponsor things such as Tuba Christmases, being the low brass player that I am. We've done them for actually 19 years already in 2025. So 2026 will be our 20th year doing that. And if you're familiar with anything with Tuba Christmases, you can actually perform in that too. If you don't live in the area, we actually do a rehearsal just prior. So anyway, you can check all those information and all the things out on www.artmusicemporium.com. And if you have any questions, do message us there. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like this podcast, subscribe to our channel so that you can see more podcasts and different videos that we do send out, as well as we're on social media such as Facebook. So do like us there. And we do have a Patreon account, which again, all proceeds go to helping folks continue making music beyond the classroom in this lifelong learning of music engagement I keep talking about. I'm so excited about the next guest. He's actually a fellow Penn Stater, and I met him actually through the world of research. We got talking about, believe it or not, the golden age of American bands, and specifically the industrial band side of things when I started proposing and talking about the Bethlehem Steel Company band that exists in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I know he has written quite a bit about these different American bands, such as the Golden Age of American bands, where he talks about the beginnings, the Civil War, the Gilded Age, the Band Age, the World War I, and then obviously the decline of music, as well as I think his most recent publication is Band in American Musical History, which again is a combination of things of Gilmore, Sousa, U.S. Marine Band, and so on and so forth. And just like I said, I'm hoping to unpack some of these things with him and talk a little bit about industrial bands and be the music nerd I am of seeing how, again, people continued in the adult world to make music. So I know he is a professor in Texas at Lamar University, and we're so excited to have here. Please welcome Bryan Proksch. How are you doing, Bryan?
Hey, I'm doing good, Josh. Thanks for having me. I'm
Yeah,
glad to talk
definitely.
about bands today with you.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. Yeah, and I was just wondering, I know before we kind of jump into that, I thought it would be kind of neat to, and I always say this with the caveat, I know it's been a little while of how you got involved with music, because I find that's always a nice way to kind of start off just to discuss, just because, I'm hoping it was a band, but I don't know.
well, actually, I started on piano
Oh,
in early grade school, and then trumpet in fifth grade. I marched drum and bugle corps for 2 years, starting after eighth grade,
oh, okay.
and then band through high school. And then I majored in music in college. I was going to be a trumpet professor, and then
Okay.
I was at Center College in Danville, Kentucky. I studied under Vince DiMartino. And then about junior year of college, I kind of switched to music history. That was when Chuck Yeomans, who's at Penn State, he
Yep.
switched from center to Penn State. And then from there, it was on to musicology. Although about, I don't know, 14 years ago or so, I started playing organ. So actually, I just decided to learn it one day. So I'm a church organist nowadays. It
Oh,
turns out,
that's
even though I
cool.
never really studied organ until I was in my 30s. So
That's awesome.
little
Yeah.
adult learning for you there, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. Well, I know it's always interesting how, folks, play, different instruments and go from, different areas. But I guess what I want to ask a little bit about is what was your, if you remember, I always say this, what was your interest in getting involved with piano in the beginning and then trumpet too as well? And then I do have that question about drum corps too, because I just had a gentleman about drum corps who's all about drum corps on the last podcast.
Well,
But
yeah. So piano, I basically was forced to do that by my parents, which was fine. And I think I was about first or second grade until eighth grade. And when I joined drum corps, then it was just too much.
yeah, sure.
Um, Band, both my parents were in band. And so in fifth grade, when it was time to pick an instrument, it was assumed that I would, pick an
Yeah.
instrument. And I just picked trumpet. I liked it a lot. And we actually, about a week or two before we had to officially pick, I went to a Herb Alpert concert. And so I guess that solidified it. Actually, there's one interesting connection to research there because I wrote the New Grove dictionary entry on Herb Alpert in the end. It's my only essay in the New Grove, but not the most widely read article, I'm sure. But anyway, so yeah, so trumpet in fifth grade was just kind of what I liked.
Yeah.
Really stuck with that for a long time then, yeah.
I mean, Herb Albert, my goodness. You know.
Well,
Well,
my dad always listened to him or whatever. And
yeah.
I don't know, he was just playing him. I'm from Milwaukee. He was playing in Milwaukee, and my father just took us all. And so there you go.
Yeah. Was there anything about that concert that like just really inspired you to, just get into trumpet playing? I mean, was there anything about the sound that he was doing or anything?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I'd already pretty much decided it was going to be
Yeah.
trumpet. It was just coincidental that was, that would have been like August, early August or something, just before school started. So
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
kind of happened. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. I know. The only reason I asked about the drum corps things too is I know how involved it is. I just had a gentleman on the podcast. I mean, he's still 100% drum corps, loves it. And I know how involved it is. And we were joking, how you say time. It's like you work and do all this work for literally maybe 8 minutes on the field. you know
Yeah,
it's just a lot of work, and he was like, but
it
it's
is.
just in your soul, and I always ask that question because I know a lot of brass players, it's just that brass sound that they just love to hear, and it's just like it gets their interest for some reason.
Well, yeah, well, for drum corps, yeah, that's true. That was pretty exciting. And it's a lot different. I marched in 92, 93, and 94. And I was in Pioneer those first 2 years. Um, and we were Division III and then Division II, very competitive. And I had just gotten through eighth grade, so I wasn't even in high school my rookie year yet. And there were actually people in the corps younger than I was. And now, and a lot of those small, A60 corps, as they used to be,
Yeah.
or Division III, most of those were younger kids,
Hmm.
and then a smattering of older, college students. But now my college students, if they hear that I marched Pioneer, they kind of scoff. Oh, they're terrible. And I said, well, yeah, but we were winning in the '90s, and then they're all rookies. They're it's like, oh, it's my age out year. I'm a junior, but I'm a rookie, and it's like that's pretty sad. Like you would have been marching for like 10 years before that if it was the '90s, and the costs and all that today are so much different.
Yeah.
But the one real constant was that summer after eighth grade. I think my mom counted that over the entirety of my summer vacation, I think I was only home for 4 nights because we just constantly
Yeah.
toured that year. And we went, it was one of those you just wake up and play, and then you put down your sleeping bag and you don't even know what town you're in half the time. It was to be, and I got actually, my oldest son is 13 right now. He's in eighth grade. And I think like, man, he's the same age I would have been marching. And it's like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I would send him off to do that, knowing what I know, but I don't even know if he could march nowadays because there's no one in a drum corps that under 18, it seems like
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot, if I'm, and don't quote me this, I think a lot of the junior cores and that all of those kind of fizzled out, I believe, if I remember correctly. I think there's some around, but yeah, I know it's crazy though. I think about that all the
Yeah.
time. Like I actually never did march. I was more involved with the alumni side of the drum corps and everything, but I know how involved those folks are. I mean, goodness gracious, just like you said, the whole summer. I mean, I've talked to people about this, how their whole summer was, just music making, the whole way.
Was, yeah. I mean, it was touring. It was a real grind, but it was a great time. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade it for anything.
That's awesome. So I know you had a shift into research, and I know I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. What again, being the music nerd I am, what got you involved, and interested into research and flipping, especially into, American bands, which I want to spend a little time on too. But
Yeah, well, it was a long and winding road because originally, as a trumpet major in college, I received a 1 year independent study, and I
Mhm,
built a natural trumpet. And the idea with that was like performance practice, which involved a lot of primary source reading and historical stuff. And I don't know. I guess I just decided that I was really good at the historical side of research,
mhm,
and I was good enough at trumpet. I probably could have been a trumpet professor, but I never felt like I was going to be like great as a trumpet player,
mhm,
which was rough because Vince DiMartino, is insanely good, and we'd have like Al Vizzuti or whoever showing up, and so it was a little intimidating. But it worked out pretty well. So I did regular music history for my master's at Penn State,
mhm.
and then doctorate at Chapel Hill. And my first book is actually on Haydn. I did a lot of reception for history of Haydn, like why people decided they cared about Haydn. And then I finished that book, I don't know, 10 years ago or something. And I said, well, maybe it's time for a little break. And, you know, it, Center College was the home of the Great American Brass Band Festival. It
Mhm.
still is. It's changed a lot. And, that George Foreman, the musicologist, ran that, and he and
Mhm.
I go way back. And a lot of that Haydn research I did was early 20th century, and so I encountered bands a lot. So I thought, just switch to bands for a little bit, and yeah, now it's 4 books later. So it's been nice because there's a lot of the older classical composers. There's so much written on them, and the sources everyone pretty much knows them. Unless you want to write on some obscure person that people don't really care about, it's hard to really just do something new. And with American bands, it's not a field a lot of people have really done a ton with. I mean,
Mhm.
we've had a lot of important scholars, but it's not as microscopically treated as a lot of
Yep.
Western classical. And so those first couple books on bands were actually pretty easy because I would just go to these archives and like Library of Congress or wherever, Iowa, the Chautauqua collection, and just
Mhm.
write out call slips, show me everything you got. And it was stuff that, no one had ever seen before. So I was like, all right, here we go. It was pretty straightforward. And then that's how I got on this industrial band kick then, because no one, well, you'd done a little work on it, but as far
Yeah.
as the idea of industrial bands being more than just one group here or there,
Yeah, right.
the idea that they were really ubiquitous.
Yeah.
When I started that work, which is about probably 6 years ago, um, my idea was that there were probably about 200 industrial bands in the United States. And now I was looking this morning. I found a few more, and I'm at 1,485 or so.
Wow.
So it ended up being like this rabbit hole that never stopped. And
Mhm.
I've decided I'm going to spend the next week to get to 1,500, and then
That's cool.
I think that's it. I'm going to just say, look, this is what I could find, and be done.
Yeah, I know. The crazy thing is, I do, I agree with you. Like just two comments I want to make. And I know it's changing, and I don't want to sound, crotchety here, but I know like even in music history, we go through all the Western music, and then we kind of skip over the American band movement. You know what I mean? And we move
Yeah,
on, to what we call contemporary, and to, talk about electronic music or whatever at that particular point. And I know it's sad because it just seems like, what existed in American bands, in my opinion, around here was just like, oh yeah, it's just that's what, it's woven into our community. But as I think like as I'm sure it's there's a decline, and some of that stuff is missing, and they don't exist anymore. Some of those groups, and
yeah.
just like you said, like with the industrial bands, I mean, to be honest, there's not that many, operating anymore.
Oh, well, yeah. Today there's only, uh, well, if you're being really strict, like they're employees and
Yes.
they're the company supported, I think we're down to two,
Hmm.
because the Topeka Santa Fe band is still around.
Hmm.
They don't have any employees in there right now, but they still rehearse at the BNSF
Yeah.
yard shops. And I think they've got a couple retirees
Hmm.
from the railroad, and the other is the Boeing Employees Concert Band in Washington State.
Uh-huh.
And when I talked to them, it was a few years ago. I think they were all retirees too. They
Yeah.
didn't. I don't think they had
Yeah.
any actual Boeing employees at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're definitely at the tail end
Yeah. The tail
of
end,
the
right? Yeah.
industrial band
Yeah.
movement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just to think of the height of all of this, you had to be an employee to be in the band. It's like,
yeah. I mean, it's the way I've defined it for the book
hmm.
is that it had to be company supported and have a decent employee presence.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
it really it surprisingly the way these bands were organized was quite varied.
Yeah.
So you have some groups like Charles Schwab's Bethlehem Steel Band
Hmm.
that you've worked on, that Schwab sinks a lot of money into it, builds him a
Hmm.
band hall. He recruits a director and pays the salary, and then tells these guys, "Hey, um, play in the band," and then
Yeah.
they go off and do it. And that is, I think, sort of a prototypical industrial band in that sense.
Hmm.
And it's not always the president of the company. Usually, it's just some random employee with a musical background that says, "Hey, I want to start a band," and then he
Right.
talks to the supervisor, the yard master, whoever, and they're like, all right, we can give you a couple $100 to do it or whatever."
Yeah.
Um, but there really are a lot of variations on that theme. So really, the most famous industrial band is Herbert L. Clark's Anglo Canadian Leather Company band, which is up there in Canada. And in that case, the president of the company, uh, he was a millionaire or whatever, and
Hmm.
he I think regretted that he never became a cornet virtuoso and a band director.
Hmm.
And so, since he had the money, he just told Herbert L. Clark, "Hey, I'll hire you away from the Sousa band because I heard you're retiring, and just tell me how much it's going to cost." And Clark named a figure, and he paid it. I think Clark was probably surprised, and then he said, "Well, tell me who you want to be in the band, and I'll give them
Hmm.
a job." And you,
Yeah.
and so there was like a group of like 5 or 6 guys that came with Clark, and then there were maybe a dozen employees that were already there that he got into the band, including himself then.
Yep.
And so then you had this weird kind of, uh, I call it in the book that I'm writing, which hopefully gets published this year. I call them vanity bands. Basically, a rich guy with corporate influence just decides he wants a band.
Hmm.
Um, but that from that spectrum, it goes all the way down to the other end of the spectrum, which is just like a band I was just looking at a couple hours ago, Belt, Montana, the Belt Miners Band.
Hmm.
And it's one of those where I wasn't really sure, do I count them or not? Because they might have been a union band, and I'm trying
Hmm.
not to do union bands because
Yep.
that's a whole separate. I don't know. It's just for some reason I said they should be funded by the company.
Correct. Yep.
So it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to tell. And that one, I'm not sure. They might have been a union band. They didn't call themselves. They just called themselves the Belt Miners Band.
Yeah.
And I don't know that the company gave them any support. I think it's just a bunch of guys that were miners. And Belt, Montana is this little burg with a coal mine, and they just wanted a band, so they just got one together and played it. And since they were all miners, they just that's what they called themselves.
Yeah.
So you really see this complete spectrum of company support, or is it one guy that's really interested, or is it a group of people, or is it like the president? There are a few constants though, and I since the podcast here is a lot on adult music making, the
Hmm.
real tie-in is that these bands are all adults and they have another job. You
Yeah.
know, even the guys at Anglo Canadian that are working this sort of fake desk job have a desk job that they got to
Hmm.
be at,
Yep.
and they just want to play music, and it's a very different time. You know, bands have this cultural significance. There's a respect accorded to band members because they're out there in a uniform and they serve a important civic function. Actually, I got a blog I wrote for the Smithsonian about how all that works, about how bands are sort of this key musical cultural meeting space for democratic ideals and civic discourse and patriotism and things like that. So the adult band is really far more important than a school band or a children's band or what high school band or what have you until really World War II.
Hmm.
And then after World War II, bands kind of make this transition. And that transition is one to becoming sort of an educational institution and not really a civic institution. And it's slow. And the 60s and 70s, you start to kind of see them fall off. And now I just think about the last 20 or 30 years, how few community bands are out there, you know, and not that they've all disbanded, but their presence and visibility. And since we were talking about drum corps, thinking back to how many parades I had to march in the
Yeah.
90s. I mean, there
Hmm.
was a parade every week, and Memorial Day there was like 6 parades. You know, we were
Hmm.
march, get on the bus, march, get on, like, oh, and I don't feel like you see that anymore. I feel
Hmm.
like there's still a few parades, but not many.
Hmm.
And there's still community bands, but maybe now they only play 1 or 2 concerts a year instead of, you know, a town band in the 1910s even or 1890s. They're playing at least 1 concert a week, if not two, and some are playing 3 or 4 nights a week.
Yep.
So there really has been a shift. And then if we talk about how people are, especially since COVID, tend to stay at home, or, you know, we talk about people don't meet each other anymore, or they're always on their phones when they're out to eat. Um, I think bands were a way that people did get out and see each other and talk to each other, and they supported that. And now it's just kind of gone. It's sad.
It is sad. Yeah, I know. I actually, it's kind of funny you said that. I kind of got on to the history side of bands because my local town of Bangor, Pennsylvania, actually used to have about seven, eight different, and I'm talking the area, not necessarily just the town,
Yeah,
7 or 8 different musical organizations operating from, like a church band to drum corps to, 3 drum corps in just our little area of the Slate Belt.
yeah,
And it's sad, today. There's two groups that are still kind of going, and I mean some church things going on, but they're not big, they're not plentiful, they're not large, they're not out there like you said, playing every week, like they used to be. And it's
Yeah.
sad. It's just absolutely sad.
Well, and you think a big city, so, Milwaukee or Pittsburgh or, Toledo, a city like that would have had maybe 20 bands because
Hmm.
every neighborhood had a park and every neighborhood park had a band.
Yep.
And there might be a few personnel who overlapped, or maybe there was one director that had a few bands.
Yep.
But we're talking, I don't that I there was one periodical I saw once that claimed their mailing list of bands was something like 80,000 bands.
Wow.
And that was when I was working on that Golden Age book. And I
Yeah.
saw that and I was thinking, man, that seems like an exaggeration. And
Yeah.
now that I've been through this industrial bands ringer, uh, it probably is true.
Mhm.
The for me, the one nice thing about this industrial bands book has been really getting in touch with how many places there are in America. And
Mhm.
when politicians talk about how nothing's made in America anymore, or we talk about the Rust Belt or there's no American manufacturing jobs. A lot of these company bands existed in small towns in rural Illinois or something, and they're making bolts or something that we would take for granted as imported nowadays.
Mhm.
Um, when you think, there were 400 people working at this shoe factory, and it was the only business in town. And then when I look it up on a map today, and you look, and it's got like a population of 200, and like it's been gutted out because
Mhm.
that company eventually folded up in the
Yep.
60s or something like this because they couldn't
Mhm.
compete. Um, but one of the joys for me then is just to realize how every little place in America really fits into that musical landscape. That these industrial bands, whether they acted as town bands or employee bands or whatever their civic function was, that they're sort of a reminder that that place existed and these people did play music, and um, that we pass it by on the interstate now, like at the end of Cars or whatever, the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but at one point,
Yeah.
there were actual people there, building the United States
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
playing music in the process.
Yeah, yeah, I know uh, it just reminds me, and again, I'm just using of what I know of my area of like I said, the slate belt. But so our town was big on slate mining,
Mhm.
chalkboards, which I know is a thing of the past, and the windowsills that would have slate, as well as
Mhm.
shingles that you could put on the house had slate. So they did a
Yeah,
bunch of different things with slate. Well, of course, there's basically openness holes of quarries that are just filled in with water or they've been filling in because there's no mining going on
yeah,
anymore. But one of the cool things that I read is when it would rain or there'd be a lot of storms, all the employees would go down and just play music. And I thought that's cool. You know what I mean? I mean, just to think about, like there's big storms, there's nothing quote unquote else to do. So go and make
yeah,
music. And that's what they would do. And I just thought that's, just like as you're saying, is like building America and building, a way of life, and how music was so part of it. And it's just, I don't know, it's like, it's just been my big staple. It's like, we got to get this back. It's
yeah. It would be nice, the thing that sort of strikes me is we talk a lot about work life balance nowadays,
Mhm.
and the idea that work life balance means you leave work and you forget about it, and it's dead to you
Yep.
for except for those 8 hours a day when you have to work there. Now you're dead to me. I don't know anything about you. Leave me alone. um and these company bands are part of a larger, what they call, welfare work movement. So, a company in a small town wouldn't just have a band. They'd have track and field events. They would have a company baseball team, like Shoeless Joe Jackson before he played on the White Sox. played in a textile mill band, and he played in a textile mill baseball team in
Hmm.
South Carolina and worked in the mill. And the mill, I tried real hard to see if they had a band, but I couldn't find a band in that particular bill. But there, every
Yeah.
little mill town in South Carolina,
Yeah.
except his,
Yeah.
had a band
Yeah.
and probably a baseball team, maybe a football team, a golf club. If you get to the 1910s or 20s, you're talking like tennis clubs, or if it's the 1950s, bowling teams, company bowling teams.
Hmm.
And the company felt the need to sort of create a local culture in a lot of these small places because there wasn't anything. And if you didn't give these guys something to do after work, they were just going to go drink, and then that was going to cause some sort of moral problems and all that. But they didn't have a sense of work-life balance, and it's not just because the mills were working them to death and they had to work 12-hour days, 6 days a week. um, it was also that their friends and everyone they knew worked there, and so they couldn't just leave work, but work could provide recreation to them
Yeah.
and social interaction and dances and smokers, or um, and nowadays you see, like, I don't know if you remember back before with the dot-com bubble, and they would talk about this high-tech company. They put pool tables in their workroom, and they let you take a nap during the day. Aren't they a great company? And now that I've done all this industrial band research, you're like, that is pathetic. Like,
Uh-huh.
you should give them all a membership to the country club or something like that. Putting a pool table in there pales compared to what a lot of these companies did 100 years ago, just to keep their workers from leaving. And then there were, admittedly, a lot of them were very bad jobs or bad for your health or whatever, but at least
Hmm.
there was a sense of sort of social obligation there,
Yeah.
uh, which now it's totally divorced. Like, give you my health insurance and leave me alone.
Yeah, right, right. Well, it's funny you say that, and I come across a lot of teachers, for example, and whether it's, the retirement fund or their pension, that's all they talk about. And, it's just because I'm in that, the teacher world quite a bit. And,
Yeah.
I feel like exactly what you're talking about is community. That's like what's missing, I feel. There's no community. And whether or not, like you said, it doesn't have to be music, but whatever it is, it's just I feel like it's just missing. Like I always feel that. And, I always joke, my wife always says this, I have this romantic idea about community. I do, because it's like, the town where you live in the town and everybody works together, and and
Mhm.
we have wonderful, where I'm living right now, we have wonderful neighbors who will do that. Like, for example, I kind of help out with snow removal, and, I was away and they took care of my snow removal, those kind of things. But it just,
Yeah.
that doesn't exist everywhere. It doesn't, that kind of, helping hand doesn't exist. And I don't know. I just wonder if that side of it would come back. You know what I mean? If it would improve community. You know what I mean?
It would have to. I mean, can just think about, like, if Walmart in every little town, if they had some employee picnic every
Yeah.
couple months,
Yeah.
but they don't,
They don't.
because
Right.
that would cost too much money,
Yeah.
and
Right.
who else is doing any of this stuff? And it's not even just companies in that sense. And you mentioned, like, church music and church bands and things like that, which were a pretty big deal before World
Hmm.
War One. Um, yeah, you think about how church attendance is way down, and that
Hmm.
for a long time that was kind of the last bastion of where people could get together and socialize. And the churches are all getting gutted now too. It
Hmm.
just the attendance is way down in the past 20 years. If you look at any statistics, so we've lost a lot in exchange for Zoom meetings, I guess.
Yeah. Even though even though we're doing one right now, right?
That's the irony.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I know. And there's good and bads to it because, I always say it's nice that we can connect to anybody and everywhere, but at the same time, I don't know, it's just, and you made a comment too. Before I just wanted to share this. You made a comment of how you used to go on, for example, parades and how that was a community function for a parade.
Yeah,
When I was, I know we were in State College in the middle of Pennsylvania, and I joke about this all the time. They would have, their parades, and other than possibly the homecoming parade, there would be no bands marching. I mean, none of the community bands in that area would march. None of them would.
yeah,
Now I'm, been freelancing back and forth in New York State and then eastern side of PA, there are still parades. Not as much, but there are parades and there are bands performing. And, there is a circuit. I've been joking lately in Westchester County kind of area of New York State that they still have their firemen's parades. You know what I mean? And they still have a bunch of bands performing. But it's
yeah.
like, I always question, like, I hope that just doesn't stop, because it's always about money, and always keeping that going and safety today because you have people doing stupid things during those events.
Yeah.
It's just I don't know.
The in that Golden Age book, one of the last documents I have in there is Arthur Pryor, who was the Paganini of the trombone, Sousa's number one trombone soloist for basically most of his career. Um, his son yeah, one of his sons ended up working in New York City for one of the major networks. He was like a radio producer before there was TV producers. He's like a really big name. I forget his name escapes me now, but he wrote this big thing. Arthur Pryor did about it was in the 30s about how bands had changed so much over the course of his life,
Hmm.
and he mentions how parades had virtually disappeared
Oh wow.
um, from the 1920s to the 30s. And it turns out today we think, well, there's a Flag Day parade, maybe definitely a Fourth of July parade, I
Hmm.
guess. Although my city doesn't have either of those. We have Mardi Gras, one or two Mardi Gras parades because it's Louisiana.
Hmm.
But there's no bands in those, and then maybe a homecoming parade. But there were parades for every single holiday,
Yeah.
and virtually every month there would be at least some kind of parade that would be sponsored by something like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. There used to be a Gimbel's Christmas parade, a Macy's parade, and like two other department stores. Like there were
Okay.
four, maybe Filene's and Bought, but there were at least three or four major department stores in New York City that had Christmas time parades.
Oh
And
wow.
now we're down to just the Macy's Day Parade. I
Yeah.
figured this out because there was some company band that marched in the first Macy's Day Parade, and they said they did, but I couldn't find the lineup. But when Arthur Pryor, when he was writing about it, it was like 36, I think. He said one of the reasons was because of cars,
Mm.
traffic, like street traffic,
Yeah.
and people, it was like a fast pace of life problem, is what we would probably call it. Like people don't have time for a parade anymore, and they see parades as too intrusive because you got to close the streets down
Hmm.
so that you don't get run over by a bunch of cars. But in the 20s or World War I or before that, you didn't have to worry about shutting down the street. You could have a quick 1 hour parade to drum up business downtown or
Yeah.
celebrate some local celebrity coming home without having to worry about, well, now we got to block off
Yep.
half the city and ruin everyone's day for traffic.
Hmm.
Um, so maybe your little firemen's parades still work because those are still small towns. But when we think about the really big cities, like
Yeah.
Los Angeles and the Rose Bowl parade or something, 100 years ago, that would have been just one parade out of probably four in
Right.
January,
Right.
Ah, it's crazy.
Well, I think about it because, like I said, some of these I've been frequent quite a bit of firemen's parades, and I find It depends where you are, of course. But like I find if they're going to block off the roads, even today they block off the roads with a dump truck. So that's including one of the township guys, maintenance or ladies who are there, working. The township folks are going to be working and to block, obviously the road. And
Yeah.
I think about that too. It's just like, I mean, how much money, or you have to buy the barriers or something like that. And it's nice that they're still doing it, but then also the people. Like, I always say this all the time. If it's a parade during the week, like a Wednesday night or a Thursday night, is mostly what I've experienced, and this is again around New York State, is it's more attended. If it's on a weekend, like a Saturday afternoon, for the most part, you won't see that many people. It's because usually
Yeah.
everybody has their weekend planned. So it's different, how it is. And of course, other than the 4th of July parades or, the major holiday ones, I say, that tends to be, a little bit more attended. But I always think is that because, they might not have something else to do? Like I always think about that. I don't want to be negative, but it's just like I don't know. I just look at that side of the community of just being missing and, hence, the bands aren't performing there either. You know?
Yeah. No. Yeah, really, we're kind of down to just the 4th of July and maybe Memorial Day, I feel like.
Hmm.
Even Labor Day, you don't see that anymore.
Yeah.
At least I don't feel like the meaning of Labor Day has really changed.
Yeah, it has. Yep.
If maybe it's because we're all anti-union or something nowadays. I don't know, but obviously I've come across a lot of Labor Day parades
Yeah,
since I'm writing on company
sure.
bands, and one of the interesting things about some of these parades, especially Labor Day, but also when there's celebrities or important people that want to parade for some reason or an election or something like that. Um, Usually these company bands would lead all the employees for the firm. So if you look at parade lineups from the early 20th century, you'll see a list, whatever band, and then you'll see the name of a company. And that's the name of the company is not that company's band, it's all the employees.
Wow.
And they would have uh, sometimes they were called marching clubs, but it was a way of showing sort of like personal pride that you had a good job, that you worked for a good company, that you had
Mm,
social respectability. And they would give, you sort of have whatever uniform they wanted you to wear, and they'd give you a little ribbon, and then you and all 300 people you worked with would march in the parade. And there were a decent number of company bands that formed because they're like, well, maybe I'd rather play music in front of the group of people than just march in the
yeah.
parade because then I'll look more special or a little more important or more formal because I have a uniform. Um, now, there's no, that would be absurd today. No one
Yeah.
would say, oh, well, I work for this, I work for General Electric, so I'm going to march in the parade just because I'm basically going to walk. But that's was ubiquitous. I mean, that was
Yeah.
everywhere. People just marched because they were employees and they
Mhm.
wanted to show up for the company, or it wasn't even for the company. It was just a matter of it was almost competitive. Like we can march better than the guys who work at the plant across the street, kind of thing. And they weren't even playing music; they were just walking in a parade. And you still see pictures of some of these parades in the newspaper, and there's thousands of people lining the side. So it's not
Yeah.
just all the men marching and all the wives and kids are sitting there on the sidelines. Um, the whole town, the whole city would show up.
Would
But
show up.
now,
Yeah.
now we got to go somewhere else. We're too busy. So
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I know it just just like what you said, that competitive side of it, and it's just that the support, it's like I keep thinking of this all the time. When you were in high school, you had that, school spirit, or college, you had your school spirit, right? And that seemed to be in this where the workplace, and that seemed to be in these bands, because it was, we're going to compete between each other, and it wasn't, and I have to say, even though I know some people probably took it too far, it seems like the competitiveness, it was just fun, to keep people with their spirit. And I think of my mom all the time. My mom says, even in the time that she worked, and now she's retired, and she says this to me all the time. She says, you used to get a job and you used to be there all your life. That's not the
Yeah.
case anymore. It's like you might work a couple years here and there and everywhere. It's like and I'll be honest, I'm a product of that. I've been bouncing all over the place too, and it's sad. It's sad that, missing that community, you know.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned like high school. To me, uh, if you look at the way high schools work and what they have and what they offer, both in the curriculum and extracurricular, but so if the 8 hour day is your job,
Yeah.
um, modern high schools haven't changed a lot since I don't know the 20s or 30s,
Hmm.
and they really are set up to be miniature communities in a
Yep.
way that's very old fashioned, and they haven't changed much since then. So think about all the clubs that are at a high school, chess club or racquetball club or jogging or
Hmm.
whatever it is, and then band or the swimming team or tennis courts or the football team, and how the entire high school is sort of expected to show up for the homecoming game and the homecoming parade that's sponsored by the high school
Yep.
and the baseball team or whatever. There are just this whole sort of universe of things that people used to do as adults that are still in high schools, and it's very old fashioned. The expectation even in the 50s would be after you finished high school and doing those things, you would continue to do those things
Hmm.
in the community.
Sure.
Whether you played golf and now you play on the company golf team or something like that, or the bowling team, or
Hmm.
darts or chess or whatever it is. These clubs and ensembles were training so that you could actually do that for the rest of your life to contribute
Yeah.
to society. And now and this has been true at least since probably the 60s or 70s, high school is seen as sort of a golden age in one's life because you got to do all the things. And now, well, sorry, you're an adult. Now you got to work. There's no more fun left. And it really, that's not the way that high school was designed. It wasn't supposed to be an end point. And college is the same thing. They have the clubs, and then it's like, well, now you graduated from college. Sorry, you got to work a 40-hour job the rest of your life, and then you die. That's not the way any of it is intended to be. Ironically, like high schools and colleges are a holdover from a time when you would do those things for the rest of your life. Even in retirement, you would still play in the band, or you would coach tennis, and then you run the tennis team at the local country club or something like this, or dance squads, and you would teach gymnastics to adults who would do it because they marched in a parade or something like that. So I don't know, maybe there's some way to get high schools and colleges to keep the alumni doing things afterwards, but those were never meant to be an end point. They were a beginning. And that, to me, the one, if you're a pessimist, the scary thing would be if they realize that maybe they would decide to cut all those and just learn. And now we need school life balance because there's too much extracurricular. Sorry,
Yep.
cutting the band.
Hmm.
Um, but there is a lot of frivolous civic function in high school
Yeah.
that really it should be civic function for adults too.
Yeah, I agree with that 100% because, I've had this conversation. For example, one of the institutions that I worked at was a non-music major school. They had, pretty hefty music program. And all the time, I would talk to, choir director and other music teachers, and people would say, "Why are you doing this?" And the answer is, "Well, we want to have the school spirit and people making music, beyond that." But the answer is just exactly what you said. They get to the end and they stop making music, and it's like, why? And that's what, and that's kind of what I'm on a path for. I'm eating my own words right here. It's like I agree with you 100%. It's like I watch my friends who were who were did very well in their instrument. Not that you had to be this, but they were an all-state band. And now they don't even
Yeah.
play their instrument anymore. And it's just sad to me. It's like you had that talent and it's just a waste of talent. And I don't know, but it's just like you. I don't know. It's hard because I keep thinking like it does still exist, but it's not embedded in our community anymore. And it's just
It's
sad.
not. Part of that is that society as a whole has become so specialized. You got to go to grad school to be an engineer or whatever. Or you and I, we make our living from music and basically only music.
Hmm.
Um, but if you look at like when I'm doing these industrial bands, you start to see these directors, and I've really limited myself to just directors because I would go crazy trying to look at all these individual people. But there are
Yeah.
a lot of directors, say before World War I, who have very little musical training. They might have played a couple of years in whatever schooling they had, and maybe they took a correspondence course, but they weren't professional musicians, and they weren't trying to create a professional musical experience. It didn't need to be CD quality and edited and all this stuff. They were just making amateur music, and it was acceptable for that point. And you would see community singings where people would get together and sing patriotic
Hmm.
songs, or like IBM. There's an IBM hymnal that's
Hmm.
all it's called Songs of the IBM, that they would
Yep.
get together and the
Yep.
employees would sing these songs. Um, and we've become so used to people being so highly specialized.
Hmm.
It's not, what do you do for a living? I got my liberal arts degree and I can do anything. No, it's, I went to school to be a chemical engineer, and I went to grad school and I did applied chemistry, and now I'm making this one little thing in one little place because that's the only way that I can make a living. These musicians, um, even the ones we would think of as very close to fully professional, didn't train to be professional musicians. They had regular careers, and they had real regular jobs too.
Hmm.
And they just found a way to work music into that. So maybe they weren't doing it all the time. They were doing music some of the time.
Right.
But and to me, the sort of the tragedy you see now is, for me, when people sing the Star Spangled Banner. So if you go to a Major League Baseball game or whatever, no one actually sings anymore.
Hmm.
They stand there, and they're watching whoever it is perform for them. And we have this really artificial barrier between performance and professionalism or something like this. And it's true in church too. I've had I try to get people to join my church choir. Oh, I can't sing, they'll say. I said, you don't need to sing. You just need to show up. It'll be fine. No, I'm a terrible singer. I don't sing well at all. It's like you sing just fine,
Hmm.
but you've been just indoctrinated by
Hmm.
seeing professionals all the time. You can log on to YouTube and watch someone do amazing musical things,
Hmm.
and then that's intimidating to these people.
Yep.
When in fact, before recordings existed, they would have joined the church choir and they would have had a fun and social time, and they would have sung just well enough. And bands are a good example of that, because it's outdoor performance, which
Hmm.
is very forgiving. They're playing in a gazebo. Half the people aren't even listening. They're having a picnic. If they play some wrong notes, no one really cares. They're just having fun. It's background music.
Right.
And now it's like, well, if I don't play as well as, Dallas Wind Ensemble, then my band is a failure. And that it's just not true, is the point. To go out and perform is the joy in itself. And it doesn't have to be worthy of Carnegie Hall. It just
Right.
has to be enjoyable, and people will like it, and you had fun. And yeah, high school is the last place that still exists.
Yeah.
So, oh well.
Yeah, well, and I feel like, even me, I think about this as you're talking about high school. Like I wasn't, I was a late bloomer in music. I started in ninth grade. And in the beginning, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And of course it was peer pressure from my friends who got me involved. And today, the ones that peer pressured me in are not even playing music anymore, and I'm sitting here going, it's just because we were doing it together as unity, and it didn't matter if you played a wrong note. I mean, of course, do you want to do good and you want to play well and you want to play the best you can? Of course. And and we want to do that. But if things went astray, that wasn't what it was about. And I just look at it that side, and I also look at the side of like the emotional side of it. It's just like how you said, it's like you could have a really horrible day, working, and you could play some music, and that can all change in a moment, you know. And we didn't
Yeah.
even brush on that, but it's just such a form of therapy out there, I feel. This is my opinion. And it's like it just like you said, it just doesn't exist. And it's like, well, if I want to have this therapy, I have to be the best in the world. No, you don't. You can,
You can think you're the best. A lot of these bands, like industrial bands, they would form and then they would play their first concert within a month. And the director would say, well, none of these guys could even read music before we started. And you're thinking, all right, so this guy, you got a band of 30 people, none of whom have ever touched an instrument before. Somehow in 30 days of part-time rehearsal, you've created this band and you see these reviews. Oh, they're the best band. Well, they're working on it. They'll be the best band in the state by the end of the summer. And then you'll see reviews like they've really come a long way. They're doing a great job. And, you know, they would always, they had a pride in it.
yeah,
And you get the sense when you read those, if you read them cynically, you're like, well, they're just deluding themselves. Like this is just empty boasting. But it's so ubiquitous. It's across the country. I don't think it's empty boasting. I think it's the knowledge that the band is serving its function and people enjoy it. And no, they're not the Sousa band or the Gilmore band. And no, their solo cornetist is not Liberati or Herbert L. Clark. But
right.
for our little burg and our little slice of America, like Seinfeld and Kramer with his screen door, for us, these guys are good and we like them. And by golly, we're proud of these guys. And that's enough then. It wasn't about Ariana Grande's level or something like this, or you don't have to be on the silver screen or have some great performances on PBS. It's just, we did it. It was fun. Yay. We had a good time.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, and I always think about that, like, what did this sound like back then? It's just like, and not to bash them, not to say anything like that, but just to think about that, or I have this other, and then the flip side of it, I had some of my current, as we recreate the Bethlehem Steel Company band, we did a concert. We're doing all music that they played now. So what I'm
Mhm.
trying to find is most of the original, if they were transcriptions, the most original that I can find, or, actually written for band or whatever. And one of the comments I got was, wow, these musicians could really play, because that's like the flip side of it. But also, I know Charles Schwab wanted the finest musicians and wanted this big boast band, so of course they're going to be playing hard music, so it's like it's both spectrums, but I feel like the engagement is what I think is it just mattered to everybody, you know?
The irony in what you're saying is that if you talk to college band directors nowadays and the wind ensemble and all this, they scoff at older band music. Oh, this is simplistic. It's too
Yep.
easy. And most of that music, a Sousa March, they're easy to play.
Hmm.
A real trained musician, like when I was in the Advocate Band in Danville, Kentucky, we would have two rehearsals, Tuesday, Thursday nights, and then concert on the weekend. And that was it. And it wasn't a big deal. And the pieces are not designed to be these inspired interpretations of a masterwork. You're playing in a gazebo in a park. So it's
Hmm.
loud and it's fun and there's a quiet section. Occasionally you got to get quieter so someone can hear the piccolo solo. Um, but compared to wind ensemble music today, and there's one or two people on a part, and it's all exposed and crazy atonal stuff, uh, it is a lot easier to play the old music.
Yeah.
I mean, and you don't have to be a great musician to do any of it.
Hmm.
So just let go and play it. And if it's too hard, then well, we'll move you down from solo cornet to second cornet, and it'll be easy enough for you then, because there's definitely a part for you. And if that's still too hard, then by God, there's alto horn. You know?
Yeah, right. I agree with that. I know. Well, I know, and I think the other side of it too, just because like I've actually dealt with some, college band directors. They don't want to play the transcriptions. They want to play music that's actual, written for band, and I get that, and
Yeah,
obviously, the reason the transcriptions existed because, back then there was no recording devices. So the big operas and the big music coming out in the orchestras was, played by the band, so you
yeah.
could hear the tune. So, but I know I struggle that with that all the time. Well, I wanted to ask you just really quickly, more of if you wanted just for the viewers of this, as you shared quite a bit about industrial bands, but as you're working, is there anything that else you wanted to share about any other the performances? I know we talked about parades, and being very well attended. I don't know if there was things like larger performances, concerts, concerts in the parks or something that you found that was very interesting, that these or other civic duties, I guess I'll say it that way, that you found very interesting, with these industrial bands as you've been
Well, I mean, they
researching.
did a lot of those things that town bands did.
Okay.
Let me see if I can. There a way I can share my screen with you. I can.
Oh yeah, here, hold on a second.
Oh,
Yeah, give me 1 second. I can get you
because
to.
I can pull up. I got pictures. I can show you
Oh, okay.
pictures.
Yeah, here, hold on a second.
Um,
Give me 1 second. It might not let you, but I'll let you in a second. All right. I think you can do it right now. You should be able to do it right
all right, let me try.
now. Yeah, because it's just interesting to me because I keep always thinking about these grandiose performances and how these bands just I don't know, it's just amazing to me as it's just this outreach into the community, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, can you see this picture I'm
Yeah,
showing you?
yeah, I can.
All
Yeah, yeah.
right. So this, I was talking a little bit about South Carolina mill bands.
Okay. Hmm.
There was this uh, society that was formed. It was called the South Carolina Textile Band Association,
Okay.
and it actually was a precursor to the South Carolina Music Educators Association.
Oh, wow.
And this is they had an annual meeting where the mills would give the band guys the week like a day off to travel and go for this sort of weekend get together,
Hmm.
and each of the bands would play a concert, and then they would play like a mass band concert. So you see these. This is Lawrence, South Carolina, the Saxon Mills Woodmen of the World Band from Spartanburg. This is Oakland Mills back here. Some of these guys unfortunately didn't paint their drums. The first rule of taking good band pictures: paint your bass drum. Um, but you can see there's about 8 or 9 bands here, and they all got together and played a bunch of concerts, and it was like a big sort of camaraderie kind of thing going on. And they met for 7 or 8 years, I think, before they kind of morphed into something else because textile bands kind of fell out of the way.
Uh-huh.
Um, see what else I got here. Um, oh, for the choir people watching, this might be a interesting one. This is a
Yeah.
Christmas program for the Burlington Railroad. You see their little Zephyr
Oh, yeah,
there. This is
yeah.
in the 1930s, the Burlington Booster Choral Club. And they had a sing along for that, singing Silent Night and all that for Christmas. Um, let me see here. I've got, well, if you want to see, this is one of my favorite photos of a park concert. It's partly my favorite because I'm from Milwaukee. So this is the International Harvester Band.
Okay.
International Harvesters had a factory in Milwaukee, and this is Mitchell Park where the domes are today. There's 3 big glass domes. It's a botanical garden now. But you can see these are all the employees that came out for the weekend, and the band's playing on this makeshift bandstand. Um, oh, I just lost it. Well, that's okay. This is a this is a women's canning company band. The wife of the owner wanted a band. She's on the far right.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's not all men, and they do get co-ed. Oh, there's my Harvester band.
Yeah.
Uh, you're a Pennsylvania guy, so there's
Yep.
Hershey's with the Hershey, the Hoover vacuum. uh, some of these are fun. This is just Rensselaer, New York. This guy playing his bass drum for fun in 1917. Oh, this is one of my favorites. This is the Panama Canal Band. These guys
Oh, wow.
built the Panama Canal,
Jeez.
and there was a band. They traveled on the weekends and played 3 concerts. Uh, Usually, they played one on each end of the canal and one in the middle somewhere. They had to take the railroad to get there, but that's a good one. Oh, and this is the precursor of IBM,
Okay.
the ITR band. Oh, all right. And as far as since the topic was social functions,
Yeah.
um, in Los Angeles, there was a woman who ran. It's kind of like a, a music bureau within sort of the Chamber of Commerce,
Yeah.
and she was the director of a company choir, and she figured out that company bands existed, and she had this sort of podium on which to work, and so she got all these companies to start bands in Los Angeles in the 1920s. And then, unfortunately, this is the only photo I could find of them. Um, but this is a mass band concert of all the industrial bands that she helped form in Los
Wow.
Angeles in the 1920s, um, playing some huge monster concert. I like that it's the nighttime and they had to light it and all that too. Um,
Just look at all those
but yeah,
people.
it's just a lot of people, and
Yeah.
I don't know how many of them are audience members, but you can see even way back here, there's still guys holding, like, you can see trombone slides.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of these are probably choir people. I feel like these are all just regular amateur musicians who showed up to
Wow.
play in the big pageant of progress.
That's amazing.
So yeah, there's all kinds of instances of people
Yeah. That's awesome. Well,
doing
thank you.
more than just parades and just individual concerts.
Yeah.
And they had friends, even in a really big city like Los Angeles,
Yeah.
people getting together just to play music.
It's just amazing. I know it's like I see pictures like that, and just like you said, it's very fascinating to see more of a, like as you were saying, more of an amateur band side of it. Because I've seen some of the Fillmore band, for example, with tons of people there. I mean, in the audience and see the band, and even today I always say this. I'm like, we don't see that. We don't see people out there performing unless it's like something like a Taylor Swift concert, and nothing against Taylor Swift, but it's
Yeah.
like, we don't see that engagement like that. And that's just, like you said, just some random area, random town, whatever, where they're putting on a concert, but everybody came. It's just it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, as we're slowing down our podcast here and finishing up here, I just wanted to ask you a few questions. I wanted to, as you know, my or last question, I should say. I know kind of my focus is on this adult education and learning and coming back and performing and those kind of things. And I was just wondering, you did say it a little bit as you talked a little bit about the choir in your church that you are working with. I just wanted to get a little bit of what you would say to other folks, your advice as we're wrapping this up, what you would say to somebody who maybe has stopped playing their instrument after high school or college and either want to come back to it, or somebody who has not engaged in music at all and wants to do it now, as I call it, and later in life, and feel that it's too late to do that, because that's what I always hear all the time. We can't do that. Which I'm sure I know what you're going to say, but I'm
Well,
just
yeah,
interested in
we
what your
could.
advice is and what you say to
Uh,
folks.
yeah, I not try not to be cliche, but I would say that you should just give it a shot. Really, that there doesn't need to be a goal to it, and the only scary part, as far as I can tell, is actually picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, can I come to practice?" And that I'm thinking about Oh, it was about 15 years ago, and I was playing Guitar Hero on Wii. Well, maybe it was more than 15 years ago, but I was playing Guitar Hero on Wii, and I was thinking about, the organ playing at my church was kind of a little iffy, maybe. And we had a high school kid that played a lot of organ, but he was leaving for college, and I was like, well, we're going to be in a real bind for organists. I'm sitting there, Guitar Hero, and I was like, this is stupid. You gotta, like me, I got 3 degrees in music. You're gonna complain about this while you're playing a fake guitar in a video game. Like, why don't you just get off your butt and do something about it? And so I told my wife, I said, all right, I'm gonna call up Fred Salman, who was the organist at one of the Episcopal churches in town. I said, I'm going to call Fred Salman and have him give me organ lessons. And she's like, okay. Well, so that was the first intimidating. There was no, like, why would you do that or what? And she's like, all right. Like, no pressure there. And then I called Fred up and I said, Fred, I want to take organ lessons. And he's like, okay, why? I said, well, I want to play organ. He's like, obviously. I said, well, when can I take a lesson? He's like, I don't know, Tuesday. Like, I'll be there. And then, I just start practicing. And a year or two later, getting like a quarter of my income comes from playing at church. And, like directing a choir, I'd never even been in a choir until I moved to Lake Charles because I was a band guy. And the choir director said, well, Bryan, you should join the choir. I said, well, no. And he's like, look, we really need you. Just join. I was like, fine. I mean, what was I going to say at that? I don't go to Bible study. Fine, I'll join the choir. And then he left, and then I became the director. And it's fine, there's nothing intimidating about it. And once you've actually gotten over the hump of telling someone I'm going to do this, then after that it's easy going. That's the only hard part, and all of that anxiety of calling about it is just in your mind. There's there's no one that's going to say, well, that's dumb, why would you do that? They're not going to say that. And maybe you haven't played trumpet in 30 years and you were the high school trumpet stud and now you suck, and that's okay. No one cares. You're not in high school anymore. And that you'll get a lot of smiling faces when you show up to the band practice, no matter how bad you play. So yeah, my advice would be to just go for it.
Thank you so much. It's very inspirational because I feel, we mentioned this before and I just want to bring it up, everybody sees that, recording ready artist and you don't have to be that, and I will say on the flip side, you will do a lot more than what you think you're capable of. And it's just, even you just said it, and not to pun and be rude to you at all, but you're a trumpet guy, you're a band person, and look what you're doing now. You're helping out with your church, you're playing organ, and you're helping with a choir. Amazing. Wonderful. But it's like
At
you
a
didn't have,
very semi-professional level.
yeah, yeah, right.
but
Right.
but yeah, I'm never going to be E-Power Biggs.
Right.
I tell my kids are like, well, you make money at this. I was like, yeah, I'm a functional church organist
Yeah.
with high amateur ability. That's it. But that's what's needed. It's
That's right. And that's
usually
what's,
what's needed
yeah.
is a person and
Yeah.
not a virtuoso.
Yeah, and that's what's needed. And I think, in our conversation, of talking about industrial bands, and how they don't exist in community bands and town bands, I think that's what people are missing, that you're just needed. You're needed to do this. That's it. It's not anything. So very well said. So thank you. And I do want to say, Bryan, you're very much an inspiration. I really appreciate all your work that you've done on, the American band movement, as well as industrial bands. I'm actually interested to see as this, new book comes out, this new novel comes out, I'm actually interested to check it out because I think it's going to be amazing. And I'll put, obviously some of the links that I have right now in the description, in this podcast. But I just think it's amazing that you're doing this work because, as you said, we kind of work on the Western side of things, and then we kind of skip over band for some reason, and it's a part of our culture. So, but all right. Well, hey, thank you so much, and I appreciate you being involved.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Josh. I appreciate it. It's been fun talking with you.